They came to us out of the sky from across the sea on a bleak October morning. As Princess Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh set foot in Canada at Dorval, they are greeted by the King's representative, the Governor-General, and by the Prime Minister of the nation. This is the official welcome. A formal expression of the goodwill of friendly millions who are yet to raise their voices in hail and farewell. The first stage of a long journey is over. A memorable visit has begun. As the royal visitors walk toward their car with Viscount Alexander and Prime Minister Louis Saint Laurent, the eyes and ears of press, film, and radio record the welcome for people far away. And after the ritual of arrival, the princess and her husband leave the airfield for the journey to the capital of French Canada, the old gray city of Quebec.
The guns of our ancient city have been silent for many years now, but we cherish them, these relics of times gone by. They are part of our citadel, the venerable fortress where visitors can breathe the air of history and recall the events of the past. It was here that Her Royal Highness came to inspect the regiment of which she is the Colonel-in-Chief, le Régiment de la Chaudière. We are proud of our walled city, but its dignity derives from something more than the military tradition. And so our sentiments were profoundly touched when these young people paid a visit to a place which has given much to us, l'Université Laval. Here, our young men learn to enjoy and preserve their heritage of French culture, and here they learn to concern themselves with matters of today. Our royal visitors were made welcome by the rector of the university and by the Roman Catholic and Anglican archbishops of Quebec, the inheritors of ancient faiths, receiving the descendants of kings. There were many functions that day, and great crowds gathered wherever their highnesses went. And because this is the seat of provincial government, they did honor to all Quebec by a visit to our legislative buildings, where they were greeted by the Premier, Monsieur Duplessis. There would be no need to explain to them the place and rights of our provincial parliaments in the Confederation of Canada, for did not the British Parliament recognize us as a sovereign nation, not French or English, but Canadian. I doubt if it was necessary to explain to the princess that ours is the oldest legislature in Canada. It is probable that in history she did well at school, and it is certain that she will continue to do well in history. We were regretting that the weather was so gloomy. But when they came to the plains of Abraham, the clouds broke, and there was sunshine upon that old battlefield. A good omen, perhaps, because here were soldiers from all units of the 27th Brigade about to leave for Germany. This was to be their farewell. After the march past comes, of course, the inspection. But it is the age of the machine. At such an affair, a princess no longer rides upon a milk-white steed. Instead, a milk-white jeep. To many of us, this was a novelty. We took much interest in the small problems of military etiquette created by this conveyance. And so, on this ancient field, Her Royal Highness said bon voyage to Canadian soldiers serving their country abroad in time of peace. It is a little paragraph of history. In the city of Quebec, we think of such events in such terms. And then we, in our turn, bade bon voyage to those gracious young people whom we remember with deep affection.
Ottawa, capital of Canada, where brilliant October sunshine and the heraldry of autumn leaves give royal color to a royal welcome. Escorted by red-coated men of the mounted police, they arrive at Confederation Square for the first and most solemn ceremony of their visit to the capital. Here is the heart of Canada, the National War Memorial. And to the cenotaph, the King's daughter and her husband have come to place a wreath of remembrance and respect. The ceremony is over. The reverent salute at the foot of a shrine where heroic bronze commemorates those Canadians who have given their lives for their country in 2 great wars. And now the Princess and the Duke have a few words with the comrades of those whose memory they have just honored. They would speak to them all if they could, but not one of the disabled veterans is overlooked. And then as Princess Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh leave the War Memorial and return to their car, as the procession moves away from Confederation Square, the pent-up enthusiasm of waiting thousands finds release. The autumn air is filled with cheers, and the massed crowds break surging through the streets. Celebration Square that afternoon, the people flocked to Parliament Hill, to the lawns and terraces before the great center block of the Parliament buildings, the seat of Canadian democracy. Greeted by a fanfare from the Royal Canadian Air Force coronation trumpeters, they are welcomed by the government leaders and speakers of the House of Commons and of the Senate. After a tour of the building, including an ascent to the Peace Tower, for a view of the city chosen by Queen Victoria as the nation's capital, they emerge to the sound of trumpets. Now, in the golden light of afternoon, the visitors move on. Many other welcomes are ahead. On another day at the Canadian Air Force Training Station at Trenton, the memorial gates swing open. By air next to Toronto, capital city of Ontario, decked in gay colors for the welcome, with flags and decorations in every street. As the colors go up, the excitement of the children is rising, for it is to be a great event for the children. And as one eager youngster recalls the day,
Daddy says he had to hold me up to see the King and Queen when they were here, but jeepers, I was only 2. I'm 14 now, and honestly, I've never seen so much excitement. Every last person in Toronto must have been out to see Elizabeth and Philip go by. It was a gorgeous day, and they were sitting in the back of the slickest convertible where you could really see them. Us kids, I mean we kids, we're all up in the exhibition grandstand, 35,000 of us. And when they came along and smiled and waved, looking so simply glorious, did we ever cheer? When the heroes who'd won the Victoria Cross went up to shake hands, we quieted down a little. That's the highest medal you can get, and there were 7 of them, all from Ontario. It made us feel kind of proud. It was simply super terrific with the flags and the uniforms and all. It was such a warm day. I felt sorry for the grenadiers. They must have melted. Daddy said it was too hot even for a man in his bearskin. That afternoon, everybody went to Riverdale Park. But everybody! You should have seen the people. Elizabeth and Philip visited the university and went to a hockey game at the Maple Leaf Gardens, and then they drove out to the park just so people could see them. And maybe so they could see the people, too. They acted as if they were glad to see us anyway. I was lucky. I was right up close when they got out of the car. And you should have seen how Philip helped her off with her jacket. Just looking at her, you can tell she's a real princess. Oh, Wally, just think what it must be like to be a beautiful princess with a handsome duke by your side. Oh...
On a warm Sunday morning, through a land of orchards and vineyards, where all roads lead to Niagara Falls. Here, like all good tourists, they view the Great Cataract. And like all good tourists, they are properly amazed to learn that 114 million gallons of water go plunging into the gorge every minute of the year. They learn, too, how the ghostly white horses have been harnessed to create one of the most vital industrial areas in Canada. Then they descend the tunnel to the foot of the falls and brave the flying spray for a closer look. Windsor, they have an impressive glimpse of the United States, the friendly giant just across one of the busiest river shipping areas in the world. The towers of Detroit looming as backdrop to a noisy international welcome. Miniature battery-operated motor cars symbolize the automobile industry which links Detroit and Windsor. The two cities have so much in common that when one has visitors, the folks next door drop in to meet them as a matter of course. The governor of Michigan and the mayor of Detroit are here among the scores of notables in the reception line. The hands across the border touch that adds breadth and warmth to a Windsor welcome. Windsor is the southernmost city of Canada, and it's warm here today, 80 degrees. But there's going to be a change in the weather as the royal couple take to the skies. Northward and then westward by air to Winnipeg, gateway to the prairies, where a Western housewife recalls a day she will long remember.
It had been sunny, and then it turned cold. But that didn't keep us indoors, I can tell you. We come from hardy stock, we Winnipeggers. Really, we have people of just about every nationality you can think of. Winnipeg's a regular little United Nations. And there were all sorts of groups wearing costumes from the old country. It would have been so much gayer if the weather hadn't been so awful. It was a good thing they had that plastic top on the royal car. It seems the Duke suggested it in Toronto, and a crew of men at an aircraft plant worked all weekend to make it and send it here in time. It would have been terribly disappointing if they'd been hidden in a closed car, though. People came from miles around and waited simply hours to see them pass. George and I were lucky enough to get tickets to the Civic Auditorium, and we were there that night when Princess Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh came to see our own Winnipeg Ballet. And honestly, when the princess came in, I have never in all my born days seen anything so lovely. She wore the most marvelous yellow lace crinoline gown with sequins and a diamond tiara and an ermine wrap that was simply out of this world. Really, she was gorgeous. That's the only word for her. Absolutely gorgeous. They came with the Lieutenant Governor and Mrs. McWilliams after a dinner at Government House. And they were so gracious and self-possessed. Dignified, you know, but pleasant and friendly, too. Everybody just loved them. I'm so glad George got tickets for that ballet. I wouldn't have missed it for anything.
The Great Plains into Saskatchewan, to the city of Regina. 5 degrees of frost and a drizzling rain. So Private Ray Vermette gets the job of restoring a shine to the boots of the Guard of Honor. Back in the days when Indians and buffalo roamed the prairies, Regina was called Pile of Bones. Now its name befits the dignity of a great center of the wheat country and capital of the province. The royal couple visit the legislative buildings, where Princess Elizabeth conveys to the people Britain's appreciation of Saskatchewan grain, bacon, and other foods that are sent overseas. Then to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Barracks, where the men of the Mounted present their famous musical ride. Indoors today because of the weather. Westward again, to the foothills and the cattle country, to Calgary.
You couldn't call it stampede weather exactly. But we put on a show for them anyhow. A sort of baby stampede. We drove them out to the grounds by stagecoach. The old Truro and Pictou mail. Same one her great-grandpa used in Nova Scotia on his royal visit 90 years ago. Indians from the reservations and cowhands from ranches far and wide. The boys are bound they'd put on a show, so we wrapped our visitors up good and let her rip. Nobody let on that it was kind of dangerous to come to the ground being frozen so hard. You get thrown on the ground like that, there ain't no spring to it. You don't bounce like you do in summer. Anyhow, it went off pretty good. And I think the royal couple got quite a bang out of the show. They went over to the Indian village, too. And the Indians put on some of their dances. Afterward, Chief Little Dog of the Blood Indians and Mrs. Heavy Shield from the Blackfoot tribe gave them some presents to take back home to the kids. Yes, sirree, it was quite a day for cowboys and Indians. I figured the Princess and Philip are going to remember Calgary all right.
Through the Rockies, white with early snow, their peaks veiled in autumn mists. Across the mountains into British Columbia for a 10-minute stop at the little town of Salmon Arm. At Salmon Arm, a small boy waits in the crowd at the station.
Pop and I had come into town on horseback early that morning, and I've never seen so many people in Salmon Arm. Everybody said it was too bad it had to go and rain, but it sure didn't keep anybody at home that day. And when Princess Elizabeth and Philip came out, we all waved our flags and cheered like everything. And there was the king's daughter standing right in front of us. And we were glad the king was feeling better so she could enjoy her trip without worrying about him so much. The princess and Philip walked around, and they even talked to some of us. We wished they could stay for hours and hours, but they only had 10 minutes. And soon they had to get back on the train. And then the train pulled out. The smoke from the engine hung sort of low in the valley for a while. And then it drifted away. So we all went home.
Down from the mountains to the Pacific coast, to the youngest of Canada's big cities, Vancouver. And after a heavy Saturday program of visits and receptions, next morning they attend the Harvest Festival service in Christ Church Cathedral. And outside, loudspeakers bring to the quiet, waiting crowd the voice of the Duke of Edinburgh as he reads the lesson.
And he spake unto them this parable, saying, What man of you, having 100 sheep, and having lost one of them, doth not leave the 99 in the wilderness, and go after that which is lost, until he find it? And when he hath found it, he layeth it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he cometh home, he calleth together his friends and his neighbors, saying unto them, Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost. Here endeth the lesson.
Now, for the first time since their departure from England, their Royal Highnesses go on board a Canadian ship, HMCS Crusader. It won't be a very long voyage, about 80 miles south and west of the city of Victoria on Vancouver Island. And with salutes from scores of watercraft, the Crusader swings out into one of the world's greatest harbors toward Lions Gate Bridge and the Straits of Georgia. Victoria was named in honor of the queen who reigned when the city was founded. And at Thunderbird Park, there are many reminders that the primitive life of Vancouver Island is not far remote in time. Rest on the island, the return journey begins. Through the mountains to the booming oil fields of northern Alberta, to the city of Edmonton. To Edmonton for the royal welcome have come trappers and traders and Eskimos from down north, from their homes on the shores of the Arctic, more than 1,000 miles away. Again eastward to the largest city in Canada, Montreal.
In Montreal, everybody comes up here for the view, to the chalet on Mont-Royal, where the princess and her husband came to have lunch. They went to so many places that day, and the streets were always crowded. 1 million people saw them in Montreal, we are told. Perhaps Prince Philip was most interested in the big shipyards, where they build sub-chasers to escort the destroyers for the Navy. But the most wonderful welcome of all was when they came to the places where all the school children were gathered. It was very gay and very noisy, and most moving, too, when the children sang Dieu sauve le roi. In Montreal, we loved to cheer and to sing. And when they left us, they knew that in a different language, the feeling is the same when singing comes from the heart. And for them, the heart of Montreal was full of warmth.
Washington, USA, where even a newsreel cameraman is impressed.
Every news outfit in the USA has a crew down at the airport when the plane comes in that afternoon. These VIP arrivals at Washington get to be pretty routine stuff for the reels. Shoot one and you shoot them all. But this one is pretty special. When their highnesses step out of the plane, our little reception committee goes to work. I get a shot of the royal couple stepping onto American soil and shaking hands with the president. The princess looks a little nervous, and no wonder with that camera barrage. Then we move in close to get a pose shot. The president never lets us down on that deal. And then the sound camera boys and the TV and radio bunch get their break when come the speeches.
Free men everywhere look towards the United States with affection and with hope. The message that has gone out from this great capital city has brought help and courage to a troubled world. In that other proud capital where I live, and in Canada from where I have just come, we also are determined to work with all our strength for freedom and for peace.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
She says the right thing and she keeps it short, which is something you can't always say about every important person, especially when the VIP is a lady. Then the princess and the Duke of Edinburgh get into the cars for the parade through the streets to Blair House. Friday morning, I'm right down there on the steps when they come out of the House of Representatives, right in the shadow of the Capitol Dome. If there'd been any sun to make a shadow. Some fun trying to keep a steady camera with a stills mob making with flash bulbs like it's the 4th of July. And 40 dozen other guys all trying to grab the same shot from the same angle. Then I beat it out to the airport for a little footage on them getting on the plane to go back to Canada. And that wraps it up.
An early snowfall gives them a real glimpse of Canadian winter in the Laurentian mountain village of Saint Agathe, north of Montreal. This is the 4th Sunday of the royal journey, and Prince Philip drives his wife to divine service at Trinity Anglican Church. This is truly a day of rest for the royal visitors. A peaceful interlude in the heart of Christmas card country, in the sort of quiet little village that represents the Canada beyond the great cities. Later, an old-fashioned sleigh ride. Elsewhere, the preparations for the final stages of the royal tour are underway. The red-coated men of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police escorts get ready for the next move, out of Quebec and eastward into the maritime provinces. In Fredericton, New Brunswick, a city of United Empire Loyalist tradition, the visitors find themselves in an atmosphere as restful in its own way as the countryside of Old Quebec. On the campus of the University of New Brunswick on this crisp autumn day, they receive a student welcome. They have already met one President Truman. Now they meet another, the president of the university, who welcomes them at the entrance to the library, commemorating two famous sons of New Brunswick who won honor and high position in the world. And because Fredericton is a friendly and informal place, the visitors are glad to cast formality aside and stroll with their hosts beneath the trees. At the historic old seaport of Halifax in Nova Scotia, rainy skies dampen the proceedings, but not the enthusiasm, when the royal visitors inspect the Navy Yard and the dockyard. In spite of a raging southeast gale that has washed out many carefully laid plans, the people of Halifax give them a rousing welcome from the moment of their arrival until the old clock tower on Citadel Hill witnesses their departure from the mainland. In Charlottetown, capital of Prince Edward Island, they visit the city where Canada was born, where the founders of Confederation met many years ago. And after a farewell to Charlottetown, on to Sydney, city of iron and steel.
When this grand lassie and her good-looking husband came to see us folks here in Cape Breton, it was the biggest day we've ever had on the island. We've always had a warm spot in our hearts for the princess's mother, she being Scottish-like, and so many of us being of Highland descent. There was a fine welcome on the dock, and Mayor Gallagher's wee daughter presented a bouquet of flowers. Then there was a bit of speech making, and after that we took them over to the steel plant. Those of us who work in the steel plant were proud that the princess had made a special request to see the place. Maybe it was because the old iron moulders who first came to the island were from Scotland. Well, we showed them the whole process, right from the tapping of sea furnace in number 2 open hearth to the finished product. Billets, bars, rods and rails. And you could tell they knew something about steel by the questions they asked. About the ladles and the molds, the ingots and the blooms. And they didn't mind the heat and the noise either. I think the Duke would have spent the whole day with us if he'd had the time. before they left, we gave them a steel rail we'd made up for a present. Just a wee one, of course, one they could use for a paperweight. Then they had to go back to the ship. It was a big day for us, I can tell you.
The cruiser Ontario moves out of Sydney Harbor, begins her run across the Cabot Strait to the final port of call. Now from the cruiser's deck, the royal couple gaze upon an island of rugged coasts and rugged people. Newfoundland, youngest of the 10 provinces of Canada. People from all over the great island wait for them as they leave the dockyards in the ancient seaport city of St. John's. And because the storm signals are up and a gale is rising, the Empress of Scotland must wait out in Conception Bay. Fishing craft and fisher folk from harbors all up and down the coast are gathering in Portugal Cove to give the royal guests an island farewell. They're here from Portagrave and Pooch Cove, from Topsail and Seal Cove and Calagrews on this morning of bitter wind and rain. Out from St. John's, down the steep roadway of Portugal Cove comes the royal car. And the islanders who have braved the gale for one brief glimpse of the Princess and the Duke are rewarded for their waiting. On the storm-lashed dock under the lowering clouds over Greeley's Hills and Old Man's Beard, warm hearts defy the cold winds and icy spray of the sea. The last stage of a journey of 15,000 miles is at hand. And as Elizabeth and Philip board the tender which will carry them to the waiting liner, the cheers of the islanders ring out above the storm. Newfoundland are the last to say goodbye. Goodbye for all of us. Goodbye to a sailor and his wife, homeward bound across the sea.